Good afternoon to all of you in UK and Europe, and good morning to all our friends and colleagues in North America. My name is Peter Martin, and I'm your chair for today. A lot of you will know me from my days as the founder of M&C Report, now MCA, and as a creator of Copper Peach Business Tracker. These days, I'm Vice President of CGA, the international data and insight specialist covering the global out-of-home food and drink market from its offices in Manchester here in UK and in Chicago, Illinois. I'm also founder of the Atlantic Club, an international community of senior executives and entrepreneurs from right across the hospitality and leisure sector who come together to share best practice, gain new insights, connect, learn from both global and local experts. And that's exactly what today's webinar is about, specifically to learn from different experiences of opening up markets. Yes, we have a truly international audience. We had over 750 registrations today from right around the globe. Now here in England, it's Good News Day. We've just heard that we can reopen our doors again on July the 4th. With 2-meter distancing reduced to 1 with some extra precautions. So we're going to open our pubs, bars and restaurants. Interesting fact from my colleagues at CGA, that reduction in social distancing from 2 to 1 meter was probably going to mean an additional 145 million pints of beer sold in the rest of this year compared to our previous expectations. So good news for brewers at least. Now, of course, large parts of Europe, the US and further afield, businesses are already slowly coming back to life, if under very different circumstances than before. So how are those experiences going to help operators not just open up again, but sustain business in the very difficult months ahead? Now, we've brought together some great speakers today, joining us from Los Angeles, Washington, DC, New York City, Miami, Atlanta, Glasgow, and a few of us in rural England as well. And apologies for probably being a little late starting, but we had a few technical difficulties getting in touch with the West Coast, but there you go, it's breakfast over there. We also have a packed agenda. We start with a scene setter from CGA's US business, Nielsen CGA, looking at global consumer attitudes and also early trading data from the US. Sticking with the consumer, we know that engaging with and encouraging our customers is going to be absolutely fundamental in getting them back into our business. So we're really pleased to be able to hear from the people driving the Great American Takeout marketing campaign, which is sort of set the states alight. Then we're going to be hearing from some other expert views on how operations are likely to evolve in the new environment, both structurally and in terms of our people. Finally, we have our leaders panel. David McDowell from Brewdog, the international brewer and bar operator, Jason Berry from DC, who runs bars and restaurants. His company is called Need Hospitality. We've got Yavuz Terry Varner from 50 Eggs, who's operator of the Yardbird and Spring Chicken brands, which are in various locations, including Miami, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and Singapore. And last but no means least, the one and only Nancy Cruz, the leading US menu trends expert, who's based in Atlanta. We really have an international panel today. So don't go away. Now, importantly, you can ask questions. The panel is on the side. I think we should have a slide to show you how to do that in a minute. The session's also being recorded, and that will be sent to you along with, as I say, along with all the slides we use. So there you go, recording and summary deck available to you. And please do ask questions as we go along. I'll be monitoring those and putting those to our panelists. So let's get underway. Our first speaker on changing expectations. Let me introduce Alexandra Martin, US Retail Services Director at CGA's US operation, Nielsen CGA, who's got the latest insight on global consumer attitudes and that analysis of trading patterns in the already open markets in the United States. Alex, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So, I'm essentially going to take you on a whistle-top tour of the current sentiment towards the on-premise across global markets. We're going to start with current consumer sentiment in the UK, which is research that's been conducted by CGA for UK hospitality, the UK industry body. We're then going to move to look at what's happened in China and broader macro trends in North America. So this could indicate what we may see happening in the UK over the next few weeks. This covers highlights from CGA's China Impact Report, as well as the US and Canada's on-premise user surveys. And then finally, a quick look at US market recovery over the last few weeks. So what have consumers been doing and what's been that impact on velocity or rate of sale? So this uses CGA Nielsen's bi-weekly COVID impact report alongside data from Restaurant Track, which is our new service which tracks on-premise sales at a granular level, which is actually free for any US operator or individual restaurant owner to join. So firstly, starting with UK consumer sentiment. So while only currently 18% of consumers are intending to return to the hospitality sector as soon as it reopens, more encouragingly 44% plan to be there within the first few weeks and 90% by the end of the year. So while we're not out of the woods yet, it is clear that consumer appetite is definitely there to get back out. And obviously, when we asked this, we didn't have a confirmed date of July 4th, which we now do, but when we were looking at a provisional date of July 4th, actually 29% of consumers said they were somewhat likely to visit on this day. So if that comes to pass, expect it to be a busy day for trading. And then for those who weren't sure when they were going to visit, or weren't visiting on July 4th, actually, realistically, they don't actually know yet when they're going to feel comfortable to get back into the trade. So this highlights the uncertainty that exists and why it's going to be key to understand actually what's going to give them that confidence to get back out there. So for the majority of consumers, it's all about being safe, no matter the procedures that need to be put in place in order to ensure that safety. Obviously, there are still 1 in 3 who are all about experience over safety, but overwhelmingly, safety is that pressing concern. And then what are those safety precautions that they actually want in place? Well, probably is no surprise, it's that distance between tables. They want hand sanitizer to be available, and they also really want cashless and contactless payment options. And what is interesting is that the distance between tables and hand sanitizer has been a trend we've seen kind of over the last few months, but it's only just recently we've seen that increase in people really looking towards that contactless option. And why this really is key is that 64% of consumers do agree that they will visit venues more if they feel safe during their first visit. So getting these in place for opening is absolutely vital. So now moving on to look at what's happening in macro context, and also looking at what's happening in China versus North America to really see where the greatest universal overlap is between trends. So starting in China, 48% of consumers visited the on-premise as soon as restrictions were lifted. And the majority of these actually visited multiple times. Importantly, it was those consumers who were the most active and valuable to the on-premise who actually went back first, with less frequent consumers needing a little bit more persuasion. So what we've seen from our research is that there are 3 major trends that we see emerging over the market at the moment. Firstly, you have financial polarisation. Secondly, some more health and hygiene consciousness. And thirdly, it's about trusting local. So firstly, financial polarisation. So this has been obviously driven by a change in disposable incomes, and it's something that's already apparent in the UK, as we found in our research with UK hospitality. So 4 in 10 consumers now have less disposable income, and this is going to impact hospitality because they are thinking about cutting back on their eating and drinking spend. Conversely, we then have the other side of consumers who have seen no impact, and then there's also that 15% who have actually seen their disposable income grow. So each of these scenarios will impact consumer habits and behaviours when they're in outlet. So in China, we saw a similar trend that we've seen in the UK, with half of people experiencing a reduction in their household income. And this has obviously resulted in a reprioritisation of spend. So based on these observations, suppliers and operators in China realised they needed to help drive consumers back into the on-premise. And this has been achieved actually by increasing those offers available, particularly drinks promotions. While this has helped convince consumers get back, what we've then also seen is a polarisation in what they're choosing to drink. So 27% of consumers in China said they were only drinking value brands once lockdown restrictions had been lifted. And therefore, some outlets are also looking more to stocking those value brands until their revenues improve. But on the other hand, there's also evidence of half of consumers are looking to spend more on the drinks. So they're looking to treat themselves and only drinking premium brands since reopening. This also ties in with trends we've seen in the US, with a quarter of consumers who are actually ordering alcohol with takeout, looking for more premium options than they have been buying in grocery. And also another quarter who are also looking to treat themselves in what they're purchasing. This does maybe pose a threat to those brands that sit in the middle, with extra efforts they're required to maintain share of throat. We can also clearly see that this division of some consumers wanting to treat themselves, while others actually being a lot more cost conscious. Looking at health and well-being, it's obviously an advancing trend that we're all aware of across the on-premise and in life more presently. And we have seen that this is actually accelerated throughout the pandemic. So 1 in 3 consumers in China bought healthy food more often. And also those who cite that the availability of healthy options was important in their decision of where they wanted to visit has risen over the lockdown period. So obviously a key consideration is making sure that those healthy options are available. With 92% of consumers in the UK also taking precautions to protect their health, it's obviously a clear part to play. Obviously, accompanying health, we've seen hygiene. Hygiene has been something we have all been talking about, and it's also risen in importance for consumers. So pre-COVID in China, 31% stated that hygiene was an important factor in choosing actually where they visited. This has already risen to 45%. In the US, venue cleanliness is equally as important. So when we asked about what was the biggest impact on them first visiting as soon as outlets reopened, it was a top 3 concern. However, when we then talk about what's a longer term concern beyond the impact of COVID, venue cleanliness was the #1 concern. In Canada, we also saw very similar trends, with venue cleanliness being a high concern. So it shows that we all have these high hygiene expectations, and consumers may be put off to going to venues, obviously, which don't have these visible practices in place. And the final trend is talking about supporting the local. So consumers have shown an increased feeling of responsibility to protect their local businesses during the pandemic. Our China survey revealed a high number of consumers seeking to invest more in their local community and also planning to continue these behaviours. Interestingly as well, 25% plan to visit local bars and restaurants a lot more frequently than they did pre-COVID-19. In Canada and the US, also seeing again the same trends. While ordering takeout in lockdown, over half of consumers from both Canada and the US say they chose to order directly from a bar and restaurant, so not through apps. And when they were ordering, they were looking to order from independent restaurants. So this does show that they were looking to directly support their local businesses. Consumers in the US also took action by looking to buy vouchers from local businesses, and also plan to continue to support and visit their local businesses more than they did pre-COVID. I think the strength of this response does reveal that local venues and those in maybe the suburbs or more rural areas actually have a real opportunity to capture consumers. But what this obviously then does mean is that city centre venues, which maybe traditionally have recovered from atypical events slightly quicker than others, may find themselves struggling. So with capacity restrictions, higher overheads, the loss of the commuter trade as more of a population adapts to working from home, and also that consumer caution, it could be tricky, especially as among those who live in suburban and rural areas are the most concerned about now going back to city centre venues. So now to focus on what actually has happened in the US over the last 2 weeks as the on-premises continue to open up. In the last 2 weeks, so the first 2 weeks of June, we have seen actually 30% of consumers have been out to eat, and then another 12% have been out to drink as well. So pre-COVID, we were looking at about 82% of on-premise consumers that went to eat out every 2 weeks. So obviously there is still more to do and capacity to fill. But I think the key question a lot of people ask is actually, were they satisfied when they went back to the on-premise with these precautions in place? And what's great to see is actually they were. The majority were satisfied with the health and safety precautions that they saw. Many of these were exactly the same as what we've already spoken about in the UK. They were also satisfied with the atmosphere and the overall experience that they had on their visit. This shows that people are, despite the restrictions and precautions, happy with what they're seeing and happy to get back into trade. The impact of PPE, reduced capacity, or potentially restricted menus does not seem to outweigh the great experience they get from an on-premise visit. But also we need to consider obviously those people who have not returned yet. So that's 60% almost of people who haven't been back. The biggest concern for them was obviously not feeling safe in proximity to strangers and just not feeling safe going out at the moment. So it does suggest that venues do need to make sure that they have those clear hygiene practices. They're talking about it. They're making sure consumers know that they are doing everything to make the experience as safe as possible. And with those that say they just need more time, hopefully as obviously we move on and we get more normality back, the majority of these people will also return. And then when we look at when they will return, it's a bit of a mixed bag. So the top two responses, obviously once the number of COVID cases does not increase again, it will be interesting to see with the pockets we're seeing at the moment of increased cases, what impact that will then have on those states that have already reopened. But also then there's those that are looking for a vaccine or treatment to be available. This is obviously coupled then with people who want to see a certain number of cases before they go out, and actually those that want to see that outlets can successfully social distance. So it does show that while some consumers are merely awaiting for some reassurance from physical numbers or procedures being put in place, others do want a more concrete solution. So I think the key question then is, what has this meant for revenues? So what has this meant to on-premise velocity or rate of sale? So while we know obviously there were a significant number of outlets that closed their doors completely when lockdown started, there were also those that stayed open. And for those, they did see their velocity or rate of sale drop by 4/5 at the end of March. However, we have seen that that has now bounced back to only 23% below pre-COVID norms. So while we're not all the way there back yet, we have seen a continued improvement. So on-premise recovery, while it was slow at first, actually started immediately after shutdown occurred, as outlets actually adapted and turned to takeout. So we saw week-on-week trends continue to grow, and then we've seen that trend versus the pre-COVID norms continue to climb, and it's a trend that hopefully we'll see continue to improve. However, one trend we have seen is that cities have fared slightly worse than their respective states in terms of the initial reduction in velocity or rate of sale, and also in their growth journey back to normal trading levels. So there may be a number of reasons for this. One, obviously the missing commuter trade from those cities. Consumers supporting local, so maybe staying more in their suburban or rural areas. There's also that consumer uncertainty about going back to city centres, so more populous, more busy areas. And there's also the differing stages of lockdown that we saw across the US. So some metropolitan areas obviously did not open at the same stage as the wider state areas, and therefore have not been open for as long. Also, as we know in the US, there is never just one story across all states. So there's been a couple of different trends we've seen. So we have states such as New York, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania that have seen a longer shutdown. And we saw velocity fall quite sharply here. However, they have maybe only been open for a week or two at this point. And actually, we have seen velocity or rate of sale go back to 40 to 50% nearly of pre-COVID levels, and actually week-on-week growth of at least 30% and up to 90% in a lot of cases. Whereas in states such as Texas, Kansas and Alabama, we've seen shorter shutdown, also lower population density, and these outlets have actually already been open for a month. And here what we've seen is actually velocity again is already back up to at least 80% of pre-COVID levels. In some of these states we're almost at 100%, and that week-on-week growth is actually continuing. So consumers, even as the on-trade's been open for a while, are continuing to support that. So 3 key takeaways. So support for local businesses is strong and set to continue. Also, on-premise will recover, but timings may differ as consumer comfort expands, and also by different areas as consumers re-enter city centres and more populous areas. I think the final key point is that safety is key for consumers. They want to feel comfortable when they're in the on-premise. They want to feel like they're mitigating, obviously, as many risks as you can. But key to this is they don't see that it's impacting their experience negatively, and it won't stop them coming back. If anything, the more we can do to reassure them, the more likely consumers are to continue to come back and come back quicker. This is why overall understanding consumer behaviours in kind of the international markets can also help move forward and see what we can expect to see in the UK. So thank you. That was a whistle-stop tour of what we're seeing internationally. Obviously, we have a lot more detail on any of these. So if anyone wants any more information, please feel free to contact either your Nielsen CGA or CGA client service team, or feel free to reach out to me directly.
Thanks very much, Alex. That was great. Some points we'll certainly be picking up with on the on our panel later on, bearing in mind they're in a lot of those cities which Alex mentioned. I think that point about safety is absolutely key, that actually consumers want safety. I mean, it's often a sense that perhaps that's not what they want, but it seems to be they are. A couple of questions coming up, and they're technical ones really about Chinese market and the research we've done. We've used representative samples for panels in all those countries in China, and as people are asking about how representative China is, we are looking at the major cities which are more westernized, i.e. Beijing, certainly Wuhan, and Shanghai, and that's where we've been focused. But certainly any details, we can send you all the details of those if you get in touch with us. Well, consumers are absolutely key as we're seeing. Now, what I want to do is introduce two great marketers from LA. We've got Sarah Grover, who's Sarah, hopefully come on screen. I know it's breakfast time over there, so sorry to get you up early. Sarah's worked with great brands like California Pizza Kitchen and Fox Restaurant Concept Food Kitchen. Now she's running her own consultancy. And Stacey Kane, who's speaking from DC, formerly with Jose Andres' Think Food Group, and now CMO of King Street Consultant. Now, what they're going to talk about is the Great American Takeout and its follow-up campaign, the Planet-Based Party for the Planet. Two great operations. First of all, Sarah, tell us about this concept, because this really has helped underpin the trade in takeout in the States, which Alex has been talking about. How did you come up with this idea?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me and Stacey to join you to talk about this. Well, the idea came from a group of us. I'm a consultant at Veggie Grill, and when the pandemic hit and continued to grow in its enormity, it became very clear to us that the restaurant industry was in for some major change, and therefore we needed to figure out a way to keep our business afloat as everyone else did too. So in a brainstorm with my marketing team, we realized that we were facing an unprecedented situation, and therefore we needed to make an impact in an unprecedented way. So rather than work against each other and try to see who could have the louder voice, and clearly the restaurant companies with large media budgets always stand out more so than the smaller companies, we decided that we should band together. This is the first time that any of us have ever experienced a situation where we're all in the same boat. So why not band together, have a louder voice together, and get the word across the country, almost like a public service announcement, to remind Americans to dine out by getting take in. And so we shared a concept. I wrote up a concept brief with my team, shared it with our agency, High, Wide, and Handsome, and they came up with the logo and all of the assets within 48 hours. And 24 hours later, we were then promoting, and I actually sent this to everybody I knew and know. And Stacey is one of those people who helped me get the word out everywhere.
So basically, you did this as this is a free campaign. So it's basically anybody who wants to get involved can get involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's see. I mean, got a couple of slides here. Let's see how it's taken off. I mean, the impact's been quite colossal. Do you want to talk us through these numbers, which are pretty colossal? Stacey, you did do that?
Sure, I'd love to. So the uptick on this was that it was really portable. So Sarah and her agency were able to give each brand posts that they could customize in any way. And so it was really easy to do a cut and paste campaign, whether you are an operator, a supplier, even guests, could easily take the meat of the campaign and retweet, repost, we had a guy who gave us billboards all over the country, even though nobody was driving. We got tons of media impressions. So as you can see from here, over 5.5 billion impressions without one brand spending a penny. So that was really, really huge. And I think the thing that's really important when we talk about these campaign statistics is there's no discount here. We didn't say come in for, a free whatever, a free widget, a free taco. We just said support America's 15 million people who work in the restaurant industry. And people literally ate it up.
Yeah, because I mean, well, the figures there, national awareness 36%. That's a lot of people considering the population of the United States. And also this figure of $310,000. Now, you tied this into charities, so this has been supporting charities as well. Sarah, do you want to tell us a bit about the charity support and how that came about? I think we've lost you for a minute.
Am I there?
Yep. Yeah, we did there, yeah.
Okay, so as word got around that we were initiating this, an organization that Stacey's involved with called CORE, Children of Restaurant Employees, brought us a corporate sponsor that was very interested in making a contribution to CORE, but wanted to link it to the Great American Takeout. And so that we created, for every hashtag of Great American Takeout, the sponsoring company would donate $5 per post. And so they guaranteed up to $100,000. That, of course, attracted the interest of the media as well as a variety of companies, because it was a wonderful way to link the whole event back into the community and support those that have been affected the most, which are restaurant employees. So we far exceeded the $100,000 with regard to the number of posts, but it really just generated a lot of goodwill, a lot of press from CNN to Good Morning America, and everywhere across the country, local television and newspapers were picking it up because it was such a wonderful way to support our industry.
But it's also something the industry was doing for itself as well, yeah, which I think is probably pretty important. Let's have a look at, because obviously you kept it fresh as well, didn't you, by looking at different treatments every week. So you want to talk us through some of the things you did here? Well,
funnily enough, when we started this, it was to be a one-day event. But after we saw the momentum that just one day created, we decided we have to continue this, because we were getting reports from companies with 10 and 20% sales lifts after this first Great American Takeout. So it just occurred to us that if we were going to do this again, it needed to have a different spin. And I reached out to Pepsi and Coke thinking, you know what, if we're in this together, our suppliers are in this together, contacted both Pepsi and Coke, and they were in within seconds and said, here's our logo, we want to support this, and we'll work with you over the weeks. And that then gave us the ideas to keep this going, and the agency created all of the different logos each week with different supporting themes. So if it was a gift card giveaway, or the picnic at home, and the superhero salute was Coke's inspired in particular. It was National Superhero Day. So they got all of their superheroes that are part of the Coke system as their NASDAQ drivers and their ski sponsors and sports athletes, etc., to support this and tweet this out. And LeBron James, who supported it from the very beginning, the momentum just continued from week to week, and we tried to keep it fresh.
And you've got a lot of companies taking part as well. I think we can see some of the treatments they've done themselves. I mean, you've got some pretty big brands involved here.
Exactly. That was the other part. To Stacey's point, we were able to say, here's some assets, but feel free to make it your own. Subway contacted me every week and said, how can we get the assets so we can have time to put our own logo on them? And you can see that here, which was another attractive point that, you know, again, had we thought about all of this at the beginning, I'm not sure we would have gotten here, but it just happened as quickly as it was.
It's pretty big. Are you still going now? Are you still doing this?
It is still going, but it's slowed down to be where it's event specific. So to support Black Lives Matter, last week we did an event that was to support Black owned restaurants. So now it's not the weekly event as we were doing before, but more event specific.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're doing something new now as well. You've got a new campaign coming up. Stacey, do you want to tell us a bit about Plant-Based Party for the Planet? You've got some pretty interesting celebs there, in fact.
So this one is really Sarah's baby, but I'm happy to talk about how it got picked up, because anytime like Billie Eilish and the Ellen Show or Ellen DeGeneres get involved in something, you know it's going to be huge. But you know, this all started kind of from the fact that, you know, prior to this, a lot of our content was about, you know, helping the planet. Before COVID was one of the biggest rallying cries. And we want to make sure that we're still taking care of the planet, even though, you know, we've got this horrible virus that's affecting all of our business. So a bunch of brands got together, including Veggie Grill, which Sarah works with, to do a plant forward or plant-based party, and using the same kind of philosophy that a rising tide lifts all ships. And so the first one was May 1st to the 3rd, and you can see all of the influencers who kind of got involved. I mean, look, Woody Harrelson got involved. So I mean, that's like a really great thumbs up to me, but I'll let Sarah talk to kind of the mechanics of it.
Yeah, okay, Sarah, how's it work? I think we've lost your sound again.
Audio again.
Okay.
You're off again.
I don't know what's going on, but
we're in LA. That's why it's breakfast time.
Well, so I had the opportunity to connect with Billie Eilish's mother, Maggie Baird, who's very active supporting plant-based restaurants and causes for the planet. And so with her organization that she mobilized immediately after the COVID hit to deliver plant-based meals to those in need on the front line, we connected, and she was aware of the Great American Takeout and said, how can we turn this into a plant-based party? So it morphed into the Plant-Based Party for the Planet. We identified a 3-day period, and we just did the exact same process that we did with the Great American Takeout, reached out to everybody we knew in this community, and it's a very vocal, very passionate movement. And it really just took off, so much so that now we're doing a second one in July, and we have the support of all of these people here, along with a lot of other corporate sponsors, like Beyond Meat jumped in and gave 100,000 meals with every hashtag, and that then spurred the Ellen DeGeneres and her show to tweet, and it just spiraled from there. So it really just showed us that if you have a purposeful promise and passion about something and people believe in it, they're going to jump on and help you, as long as it's authentic. And I think both of these certainly were.
That's amazing. Do you have time to anything else? Probably not these days, but still. Anyway, look, guys, really thank you. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us, Sarah, particularly, because I know how early it is over there. And yeah, we'll have you back. We're going to be doing more seminars, so we'll like to keep track of what you guys are up to in July after you do your next thing. Thanks very much. See you soon.
Thank you.
So, Sarah, I think we can lose you on your cam now as well. Thanks very much. Excellent. Well, look, that's that's really a lot about consumers, not only their trends, but how we need to connect. I think that's pretty inspirational for us over here in UK and Europe as well, about what the industry can do for itself. Now we want to switch a bit and actually look at some of the operational changes we see coming. So for this next section, we put together 3 industry veterans. I hope they don't mind me saying that, but between them, they've got a wealth of knowledge and understanding of global markets, looking at international markets, working with international brands, which they've continued to do during the lockdown. So please welcome, first of all, Luke Fryer. Luke, Australian living in New York City, restaurateur, entrepreneur, but more importantly, founder of Terry, the online people management platform, or as he would call it, the workforce operating system, which handles everything from recruitment to payroll, a great supporter of Atlantic Club as well. We've got Terry Varner, president and owner of Herman Stewart, the US-based construction business, which built restaurants and bars right across the states for brands including Panera, Houston's, B.F. Chang's, Wolfgang Puck, and ones people in Europe will know, Nando's and Leon, to name but a few. Again, a good friend of ours at Atlantic Club. And last but no means least, Philip Harrison, founder of Harrison, the hospitality design and branding consultant, with offices in London and Birmingham here in UK, but also in Dallas, Texas, and most recently Melbourne, Australia. And Harrison is the Atlantic Club's founding partner. Welcome all. Thank you very much. Now, where are you all? Luke, are you in New York, or you were in Nantucket last time I spoke to you? You were
still in Nantucket at the moment. Just waiting for New York to calm down a bit.
Excellent. Terry, you're in just outside DC, I think.
I am. I'm in my office just outside DC.
And Philip, you're in the metropolis, somewhere in the middle of the Cotswolds here in England, aren't you?
I'm sitting in the middle of the Cotswolds, yes.
But again, truly international. What I want to do is probably start with, we're going to bring Luke in later because specifically to talk about people, but I'll probably want to start with Terry and Philip to probably look at some of the structural business changes and consumer attitudes and what people are going to expect, and as it were, looking beyond the Perspex screens, because people are sort of obsessed by that, but actually there are longer term trends. Now, I've asked all of you, and I'm going to ask all of you for, Buzz, I don't think we need you at the moment, but nice to see you. Thanks very much. It's technology and it's global. That was Miami, by the way. I think we asked all of you is to what are the 2 trends you're picked up which have come on stream during the crisis, which you think are gonna continue? Let's start with you, Philip. What are you seeing out there? Obviously not just from the Cotswolds, but for your businesses in the States as well.
Well, I think if I start with a slightly different spin on that question, what are the things that we've been doing and have seen in the industry now are going to be around for the long term in one form or another? And I've got a couple of headings really. The first one we'll start with is flexibility, because so many experts are saying that this is something we've got to get used to living with, not just COVID-19, but other pandemics that are likely to be around. So I think that whole flexibility issue, where you're able to increase or decrease your capacity and introduce and take out measures, is going to be quite important in the future, and doing it in a way that doesn't harm the personality and the ambience of your space, be it a bar or a restaurant. So I think that's one potential key area for the future. I think the other one is going to be, again, slightly different tack. Certainly the restaurant business is going to have to compete with that growing home consumption market, from what we've just seen about the Great American takeout. I think restaurants have one big advantage potentially, if in that they can be very experiential, that you want something that you can do in a restaurant that you can't actually do at home. So the kind of things you think about, you've got a couple of people on later, Brewdog, which is quite a theatrical environment. You've got other experiential restaurants like the Big Mama Group, And then you've got the multiple activity operators. So you've got Flight Club and our own psychosocial, which we recently developed in Dallas. And these are things that you just can't do in the home environment. And it's that sense of escapism. And I think a lot of people are going to want escapism in the future.
I suppose the question is, I'll bring you in a minute, Terry, and pick up on those and your own themes. How do you do that with, okay, social distancing in UK is down to one metre, and we'll talk about the States in a minute. How can you get that experience? Because I think you're right, because people are going to want something new, but how can you adapt that? Is that where your flexibility comes in, adapting it around the new safety measures, which we hear that consumers actually do want? Philip, how's that going to work?
Sorry, I thought that was a question for Terry. Apologies.
Problem with virtual conferences, eye contact.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with the fact that consumers are going to want these things, and I wasn't actually concentrating there, so you better ask me that one again, can you please?
No, really, it's about how do the experiential things develop alongside the safety factors you've got to put in, because in the census states you've moved beyond that.
Yeah, I don't think that these are all challenges, but there are solutions out there to these challenges, you know. But it's important that these are things that have a sense of permanence about them. They become an essential part of the personality of the space. They don't look like, oh look, we've got social distancing in place. It's almost, they've got to be a little bit invisible. So I think you learn from everything that we've been doing in the recent past, which we've done a number of things with clients, and take those learnings and adapt them further as permanent solutions. In terms of, when I say permanent solutions, the ability to move things around and change the environment, and the need to change the environment could vary according to what we're dealing with. In terms of, and it's going to vary across markets as well, because it's a generational thing. Yeah. You know, as we all know, and I'm only repeating what's out there already, that younger people are going to be much less risk averse, and they're more likely to congregate more, whereas older people are going to be a little bit more circumspect and a bit considered. So all of those things are going to feed into this.
Terry, what are you seeing? Because you continue to build restaurants in certain parts of the States. It wasn't a complete shutdown for you and your business.
No, we didn't shut down completely. I've had at least 9 or 10 jobs going on throughout the whole pandemic, and I think each state reacted a little different. But look, I think Philip's right. I think flexibility, but I think convenience. I will tell you, you know, a lot of the states here have been open a little bit longer. You guys are going to open, you know, thank goodness, July 4th. The people are ready to come back. The vast percentage, a larger percentage of people are ready to come back to the restaurants. They do want to know that they're safe when they're there. But I went out the very first opportunity we could to whatever opened, whether it was outside dining or indoor dining. I've done both. And Philip, you're right. When you go, you don't really, except for the tape here they put on the floor to try to remind you that you need to stay 6 feet away from everybody else. When you go to patio dining now, the tables are far apart, but the way they've done it, it feels like it's been that way forever. And, you know, Americans have short-term memory. In some reasonable amount of time from now, the pandemic will be in the back of their mind, but most of it will be forgotten unless something else changes, because they're just going to adapt to the new norm quickly. I think the governments here states and cities have done things uniquely different. Like Annapolis, Maryland, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they closed down one of the main streets, and the restaurants have a free-for-all. They're able to come out into the streets if the weather's good and set up as many tables and chairs as they can, as long as they keep their distance. And people have really adapted to that. You know, we couldn't go to bars before, or pubs, and buy cocktails and stuff to go. Most of the cities and states changed that. I look for some of those dynamics to stay that way and not go back.
Yeah, and also we take home and in terms of technology as well, because I think we're seeing technology you probably see in an airport car park, the license plate recognition, that sort of stuff coming in, so people can track people and know that people are there. And so the efficiency seems to be by necessity increasing as well. Are you seeing that?
We are. We're seeing that contact tracing. I mean, most of the restaurants you go to, they're going to take your name and telephone number, maybe email. So if they need to track you and trace you, if something happens, they'll have that technology. I see casinos and stuff putting in machines that when you walk through the front door, it's doing a couple different things. It's taking your temperature and analyzing you. If the machine picks up that there's a concern, then you get pulled aside for secondary screening. I don't think that'll filter down to the restaurants. I don't think that they would absorb that cost to do that. But I've been to restaurants where they're taking your temperature when you get to the door, and you don't have a temperature, they're letting you in, and it's sort of business as usual. So I think that the technology piece will change some. I think when we build restaurants, you might find a couple additional hand wash stations throughout the restaurant, depending on the size, for that opportunity to wash your hands more frequently. But short of that, I haven't seen a lot of technology changes in restaurants.
Interesting noises there. So I think we're going to go talk back of house in a minute, but I think that is quite interesting. We're going to talk about casinos and Vegas later on with Yahoo's actually. I think that's people that seem to have got back to normal pretty much there. And I think it's actually interesting in UK about you saying opening streets in Annapolis. That's what we're hoping for. And one of the technology things which Alex was talking about earlier, we've seen contactless move up the demands of consumers, which wasn't there early on. Luke, let's talk about back of house as well, not just back of house, but people, because, we've talked about consumers, but the other group of people who are absolutely fundamental for getting this right is our staff. And you guys, Harry, done a number of things with your website of trying to find people jobs during lockdown, both in UK and US, through Hospitality Unite, but also you're doing sort of the health tracking thing as well. I mean, what's your sense of the mood of the workforce, both in the States and UK?
I think as is common with many industries, I think that the headline is that there's a great degree of anxiety, a sense of displacement and uncertainty. And, it's interesting comparing what's happening in our own business. Harry is solely focused on the hospitality industry, but we, the people we employ are theoretically employable across other technology industries and or other technology verticals. And the hospitality industry and the fact we service that industry, and many of our customers have been very impacted. In the 220 odd people who work for Harry, I've had to assure them that the hospitality industry has a bright future, and we're part of that, because this impact, or this crisis, if you will, has had obviously a disproportionate impact on our industry. And I think there are a lot of people who are saying, where do I fit in the hospitality industry? What can the hospitality industry do for me now? And we had a problem going into this as an industry about attracting and retaining and developing talent. But now we have a more existential kind of question around the actual existence of a portion of the industry. And so it's interesting reassuring technology people around that. And of course, I have my own restaurant business as well, and that restaurant business happens to be located in Times Square. And even though New York is starting to open up again, New York being obviously pretty disproportionately impacted, I'm telling my team in Times Square, I don't think we're going to be open until August or September, and Broadway's not going to be open until next year. And until all these things kick into place, you've got to tell different stories to different teams of people. And I think that impacts multi-unit operators, because different units within their estates are going to be impacted differently.
So what you're saying is we're going to have to look at how we handle staff differently, and that will continue rather than we've done before.
There's a great degree of organizational flexibility that needs to be proven at this point in time, because you look at a 20-unit estate, the way those businesses are going to operate and behave in the West End are going to be very different to how they're operating in some of the suburban markets and non-London markets. The same thing applies in the US. And so there needs to be a great degree of organizational flexibility, but keeping everyone assured, and really, especially those very important career-minded individuals in our teams, letting them know that there's a long-term future here after what is a very difficult period.
Yeah. What about in terms of the physical stuff back of house? Because you've got people coming into work doing health checks. You know, are the whole procedures going to change as well? And in a sense, not just reassuring people about their jobs, reassuring that it's actually safe to work.
Yeah, I think that, you know, this whole situation is really, it's acted as a fire starter for companies to look at people, systems and processes, and specifically systems and processes around health and how those are implemented by our team members. I think what we saw very early on, especially in the QSR environment, so the US and UK were different, right? The UK completely shut down. Many types of operations in the US went for partial trading, and many of the QSR operators continued to trade. So even as early as, you know, the 1st of April, you had McDonald's when McDonald's UK had completely shut down, you had McDonald's US continuing to trade, and they began to put in, as of the 1st of April, they began to put in employee health check measures in some form. And what we saw very quickly was an enormous amount of anxiety amongst team members about actually coming into work, and not having the reassurance that their colleagues, let alone the customers, because a lot of this was through drive-through and they were quite physically distanced from customers. But how do I know my colleagues are well? And so we moved very quickly from the middle of April to create a platform, very exciting name, the Employee Health Checker, but it was simply designed to make it very easy to collect a couple of key data points from an employee on a daily basis, bring those into a central enterprise-ready reporting and audit environment, but most importantly, to generate visual cues for both the team members and customers. So things like printing out an anonymized employee health check manifest that you can literally stick on the front door to let customers know that there is a process in place to monitor employee health, taking that same version of that piece of paper and putting it on a delivery bag. And what we initially thought would be seen by employees as an extra chore, as an extra hassle, was so readily embraced because they were looking for the reassurance. And so next thing, we created a simple sticker that said, you've had your employee health check for today. And then they can look around their team members, and just that simple, you know, the sticker seems to be the most popular part of the whole process.
Yeah, that's like
visual, very important.
That's going to become part of it, because as Terry was saying, people are already getting used to stuff. Terry and Philip, can I come back to you? We've got a question from Carl Yerrick, really about how restaurants really combine traditional sit down with the virtual takeout, because we've seen that's become a really important part of the US business. It's kept casual dining, well, not quite afloat, but it's certainly giving it a base to actually grow out of. Are there problems that you guys are going to have to help them overcome to sustain that, or do you think people will move away from takeout, Terry?
Look, I think people always do takeout. It's been in our lives for a long period of time. Look, I did a lot of takeout. I tried to support as many local restaurants during the shutdown as we could. So, it was great. But after weeks and weeks of takeout, quite honestly, I personally couldn't wait to get back to a restaurant. And as Philip said, there's things you can enjoy at a restaurant that you don't get with takeout. So I think you're always going to have takeout, but I still think that the demand to go to a restaurant and sit and eat and have that experience, whatever it is, if it's a flight club, that's one type of experience. If it's a restaurant that Jason Berry has, by example, that's a different experience. I think that people still want that experience and that opportunity, as long as, again, as they feel safe, they're gonna continue to do that. I mean, when restaurants opened up here, you better go early. I mean, if you want to go somewhere on a Saturday or a Sunday that had outdoor seating and they opened at 11, you better be there queuing up at 9 a.m. or you're not going to be in the group.
This is encouraging for us in the UK waiting for July the 4th, because basically say people are coming back. Let me finish on you, Philip, and on the similar thing, because it seems to me, obviously you've continued to work, I know, in the States, just like Terry has, because it hasn't been total lockdown, but obviously UK has. But one area you have been working on, I know, is virtual ghost kitchens. Do you see that as a long-term trend?
Yes, I do. I mean, it still is. It's another facet of the industry, and it was a growing trend, and I think it will continue to be a growing trend. To a greater or lesser degree, I couldn't really say. Possibly a little bit more, because there's no doubt that click and collect and that whole delivery market is going to benefit from this. But on the other side of the coin, human beings are very gregarious, as Terry was saying. We all like to go out. We all like to socialize, and socialize beyond your home, really, and beyond your immediate friends. You want to meet new people. So I think that's a counterbalance to all of that. But yeah, I think the dark kitchen market will continue to grow. But I think also a point Luke made, the little badges and things, the whole visibility, and I think this comes into our sphere as well, you know, the visibility of the precautions that you're taking long term are going to be really important. And I do think, you know, enhanced hygiene is now very much on people's agenda, and it's not something that's going to go away after this. But you're also talking about the restaurant business needing to adapt as well, to have more better facilities in terms of the carry-out operation. And again, there's a couple of clients we're already working with on that, and we've created some generic ideas around how do you create a proper takeout, click and collect facility within a restaurant. And I think that will be something that will happen increasingly. So you can keep the two slightly separate.
Well, thank you very much. We could talk more about this, and all you out in the audience, I would recommend you get in touch with these guys, because they do know what they're talking about, and they've got vast experience. Thank you very much. I think there's a couple of lessons out there, and I think interesting from you, Terry, as well. You know, the fact that people will get used to a lot of these changes as well. They'll become second nature. But as you said, Luke, it's even a long haul for parts of the States, and I think we're going to have to get used to that in UK as well. We're not all going to open up on July the 4th. So thanks very much, and we'll hopefully see you again on another one of our webinars before the end of the year. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Terry and Luke.
Thanks.
Well, that moves us on to our last session of today, where we're going to be starting looking at frontline perspectives, where we're bringing in our leaders panel with expertise from not just the US and UK, but also Europe. And I know that was one of the questions we've had. What about Europe? Well, we're going to touch on that now. So let me introduce our panel. First of all, we've got Nancy Cruz, leading menu trends expert, a legend in the States, David McDowell there, who COO of Brewdog in probably every country in the world these days. Jason Berry, a man who knows the DC market inside out, and I've spent some great times with him only last October. And Yavuz from 50 Eggs. He was there a minute ago. Yavuz, where are you? Let's say there he is as well. Actually, we were having lunch in Miami at Yardbird back in February, which I said to him not so long ago. It seems like a couple of years ago, and it's only a few months. How life has changed. But thank you all for joining me today. I want to start with Nancy, actually, because to give that broader view, and then we can open up the conversation. We started with a fair bit of data, but Nancy, you know, how are you seeing the US market? How are you reading the overall market in the States at the moment?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for bestowing legendary status on me, Peter. It's a lot of pressure. I'm not sure I'm up to it.
You are.
Thank you. As a general statement, Peter, I think you and I may have talked about this. We are beginning to see the early stages of recovery. Here in May, sales jumped 29% over the sales in April, which led some optimists, perhaps irrational optimists, to suggest that we had hit the bottom and we're on the way up. I think that may be a little premature. Nonetheless, in May, our sales were $25 billion below what they had been prior years. So we have a long way to go. That's, however, a bit of good news. The bad news is that 75% of restaurateurs in the US do not expect to see profitability at any point in the next 6 months. And the worst news is that since the inception of the shutdown, we have lost over $120 billion in sales. And I should point out, Peter, that this is data from the National Restaurant Association that was released prior to the onset of what is perhaps the ugliest of all, and that is this extraordinary civil unrest. Broke out late May and is still ongoing here in the States in various major metropolitan areas. What all of that comes down to is that restaurateurs have been challenged to pivot. It is the buzzword of the era, and we have been pivoting in multiple dimensions. Sophie, if we can bring up the first slide.
Here we go. We can see it, Nancy, can you? It's the operational pivot.
Well. Yep, absolutely, thank you. This is the great ops pivot, and all of these brands are best in class. They are leading edge operators, and if for a moment I could leave Chick-fil-A to the side, the remaining 3 brands are full service, broad menu, and in normal times realize perhaps 5 to 7% of their total sales from takeout. As they had to pivot to 100% of sales, look at the Cheesecake Factory, for example. Menu rationalization was the order of the day. They dropped 40 items from their menu, which is more than some of my fellow panelists even have on their menus. They had to rationalize the back of the house. They run their stores with 12 to 20 line cooks per store. They went down to 4 to 6 line cooks, one of whom is a manager in all stores. They had to retrain their managers to work in the kitchen. Lower left, Marlowe's Tavern. Sort of my model for what the 21st century casual dining chain could look like. It has a chef-driven menu, but they ran afoul of logistics. Simple things like only 1 telephone line per store, for example. They never needed more than that. They did not have an adequate digital platform to take orders. Packaging challenges. I mean, the good news for them was they did a Mother's Day special. They had 800 orders for the special menu. The bad news was the kitchen was overwhelmed in the simplistic issues of getting the food into the packaging and securing the packaging. I mean, mundane snafus like that. Upper right. First Watch represents what is arguably the hottest segment in our industry at the moment, which is a breakfast, brunch, and lunch operation. They close their doors about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They're wonderful menu developers, but a lot of the breakfast items, think fried eggs or French toast, don't travel. They had to rationalize. But their chef told me that the biggest shock for them was supply chain disruption. As we moved through March, the entire food supply chain in the US shifted away from restaurants towards the retail grocery sector, which resulted in product outages. And then, of course, lower right, Chick-fil-A limited service. Many people in the States consider Chick-fil-A the best run restaurant company in the business. I concur with that. Of course, takeout and off-premise drive-through is right in their wheelhouse. They do 60%, 70% of their business off-premise. Nonetheless, they were challenged because most of their business is in or breakfast. That's especially true for their new urban units. That business went away. They pivoted to a focus on meal kits in the evening. We've not seen results on that as yet. And Sophie, as we move to the next slide, I would just suggest two things off this slide. The first is one of the interesting things that we've seen as a result of this extraordinary shutdown has been the resuscitation of two business units, business sectors that were considered, in the case of meal kits, dead in the water. Nothing to say about this, and all of a sudden, this extraordinary rebound. The other, of course, for different reasons, 3PD, third-party delivery, which is thriving. All right, so the second major pivot, of course, has been the experiential, and Philip spoke to that. This is arguably, from my point of view, the most strategically important kind of customer connection you can have. A lot of it, of course, is based on emotion. Moving down the left-hand column, this is not meant to be exhaustive, but it's a kind of sampling of initiatives that various operators have undertaken thanks to digital technology to keep their customers engaged. And I suspect that everybody who is viewing this can come up with sort of examples of their own. But I did want to direct your attention to the right and specifically call out an operation called the Darling in Chicago. No sooner had they opened for business than they were forced to close. As you can see, it looks like an almost neo-Edwardian club. It is a bar and supper operation pitched towards millennials and Gen Z. And as a result of the shutdown, they pivoted to an absolutely wonderful meal package for between $50 and $60. You got a box of bubbly and a multi-course meal for two people. You got flowers and candles on the subject of the experience. You got a paper menu with 2 QR codes. You activated the first while you were dining, and you had music and sort of mealtime entertainment. When you finished, you activated the second, and you got a free DJ set for 1 hour. The LED projector, you turned it on, focused on your ceiling, and you got a disco ball so you could have your own club at home. Absolutely brilliant. So Sophie, as we move to the last slide.
I think we're going to hold that one because I'm going to get you to come back to that data about.
Then the only thing that I would say to close is that we've seen this extraordinary upturn in creativity across the board, both operations and experiential. Thanks, Peter.
Nancy, you proved that. Don't go away because we want to bring you back in there because your experiences are broad. David, you're quite happy today because we've got July the 4th, even though Scotland, where you live, and you're talking from Glasgow now, I think, hasn't reopened yet. But also you're in Europe as well. What are your experiences of Europe and where you are opening? And what lessons are you learning for what the UK may look like when you open your bars? Actually, just remind us first of all. I mean, Brewdog, everybody thinks they know Brewdog. How many bars, how many countries, how many breweries have you got now?
Hi, Peter, and thanks for having me. I think the call's been great so far and really informative. We're now at 104 locations around the world, 4 breweries around the world. So in Scotland, in Germany, in Ohio, and in Brisbane, Australia, and those bars and pubs are now in 20 different countries around the world. And we also export beer to 60 odd countries, but in terms of operating in a reasonably broad spread of geography, then I think we're kind of probably uniquely placed to get some interesting insight into how different countries, different legislative approaches are taking a view at how to move past lockdown and reopen the sector. So on that particular note, I guess when we look at Europe and in particular, there's been a really inherent contradiction, I think. So it's been a bit of a mixed bag in some ways. So the government interventions have been different in a lot of different countries. The impact of those interventions have been different. Consumer sentiment's been different, and the way that our teams have responded to this has been different. And there's been some great examples, I think, of governments and leaders who have recognized the importance of hospitality to the fabric of communities and societies. I think the way that Macron in France spoke about hospitality was a best-in-class example of that, and set a tone which I think created some consumer confidence, and almost a galvanized public mission to support this incredibly important sector. So there's been a lot of different inherent contradictions, but I think there's been some remarkable similarities as well. Almost everywhere that we've opened at around about 45 to 50% of pre-COVID trading. The ramp up has been slightly different, and I agree with a number of the points earlier about how important local and community focused venues and pubs and restaurants and bars seem to be for people at the moment, and I think that's a long lasting trend. But one thing that we've seen that is absolutely consistent across the board is that hospitality is important to people. So as we walk through some of the interventions that operators have to make to create a safe and welcoming environment, I think a big danger for us as operators is to do that in a way that we eradicate a little bit of the magic of hospitality, which is why we all do this in the first place and why people come to visit us. So for what we are seeing from consumers is that hospitality is really important to them. The magic of hospitality is important. As Philip talked about earlier, creating that element of escapism, well, gosh, that's more important than ever for people. And the theatre and the social interaction of hospitality is really important. So I think that what we have discovered and what other operators in the sector, and I talked about this at length on another call in the UK today, that balance between how do I make sure that customers and consumers come and they feel safe and they know that we tick all of the boxes in terms of precaution, but also give them that little moment of escapism and magic that they're absolutely craving. And getting that balance right has been a very interesting challenge for us.
Let's come back. Jason, let's move to you. You're in DC. Your business, and I say, great times with you back in October. Can you just remind us of what you operate and what's open at the moment? Because DC has been fairly badly hit for all sorts of reasons, and you're sort of behind a lot of the rest of the states.
We've had a lot of fun times here. Right when we get reopened, we get protests and riots to have a little icing on the cake. So it's been a pretty wild few months. We have 4 restaurants that were open pre-pandemic. 2 locations of Succotash, our southern restaurant with celebrity chef Edward Lee. And then we also had Mi Vida with Roberto Santibanez, a Mexican restaurant, and The Grill, an American sort of reinterpretation of a modern steakhouse. Both of those restaurants are at the wharf on the waterfront here in DC. We also had a 5th restaurant that was supposed to open about 7 weeks ago that's completely finished and just waiting for the right time to open. Of our restaurants, 2 of them opened with patio dining right away. The 3rd one a week later, around June 8th. So June 1st, we had 2. June 8th, we had the 3rd. And then our 4th restaurant has no patio and therefore was not able to open until this week when we were allowed 50% dining inside by the mayor for phase 2 of the reopening, if you will, from COVID. So we're anxiously awaiting our 4th restaurant to open tomorrow for 50%. And then our last restaurant will be whenever the time is right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, DC's, interesting model for us looking at the big cities like London as well, because are people coming back to work? Because one of the issues we've got in UK is a lot of people working from home, and understand that the federal government is going to be working from home for some time to come. How are you planning for that, and what sort of people are coming out to you at the moment?
You know, there's an enormous amount of pent-up demand. There's really so few ways for people to socialize anymore. You can't go to a bar, you can't go to a nightclub, you can't go to a concert or a sporting event. So restaurants are really one of the only things you can do with somebody besides take a walk, you know, or do something socially distant, go hiking or something like that. So to some degree, if you want to socialize and get back to some sort of new normal, restaurants are one of the only things you can do legally. And so we're seeing a lot of demand, despite the fact that, you know, the majority of our seats are interior seats and not on the patio. We've had the fortunate luck to expand our patios a bit with some help from the landlord in the city. And so we had a good number of seats, but just with patio alone, our two restaurants that had year-over-year sales and patios last year did about 50% of the revenue from prior year. While 50% is terrible, it's pretty great given the fact that you have no bar, no private events, no inside sales to speak of. So that's, and you know, weather in DC is not your friend very often. It seems to rain here only Friday night at 8 o'clock or Saturday at 8 o'clock. So we have a lot of weather. And you can't bring people inside if it rains. So if it rains, you hand them a takeout box and say, sorry, the mayor won't let us bring you inside. There's no way to bring people inside if it starts to rain on them. So it's now that we have the inside dining, I expect those numbers to increase considerably, especially as the weather turns hot. And you know, I'm optimistic. I'm just very concerned about, you know, what's down the road for, you know, the second wave that they call and whether that's coming or not, and the apprehension people feel.
Yeah, because let's put the others. I mean, Miami's in a sort of similar position in a sense to DC. You've had your problems there. You were later opening, and certainly concerns about second spikes. How's Miami, say, compared to Vegas? Because I know you were in Vegas last week.
Yeah, very different, very challenging. Miami, you know, just yesterday the mayor issued that everybody has to wear face masks in public, which wasn't mandated before. This literally just happened yesterday. This came on the back of the city shutting down restaurants over Father's Day weekend because they weren't compliant with COVID guidelines. You know, what it does for us as operators, it puts an additional strain on our managers and our staff. I'm not concerned about how our staff and how our management team deals with the COVID compliance. I'm more concerned about the customer behavior, what we're seeing in the last 2 weeks. You know, we've been open now two weeks in Miami, 3 weeks in Las Vegas, and it's very unique that for the most part, from consumers or customers have thrown caution out the window once they have the comfort level. They see employees with masks and gloves, they see the hand sanitizers, they see the clean table, they smell the detergent, and once they sit down after the first sip, they, you know, all the caution is out the window, which provides a challenge. You know, you see the demand is there, but obviously we want to stay open in the long run. So Vegas is very different because people who come to Las Vegas, they clearly want an experience. They clearly are there to experience more than just the restaurant. They want to, you know, in absence of clubs and shows, they have to find other entertainments. You know, DJs are popular again just because that's the next best thing to go into a club or to a show. And it's all mainly indoors in Las Vegas. In Miami, we've got outdoor spaces with limitations and social distancing. Just like in Washington, D.C., weather is the wild card. Miami is officially now in hurricane season. And for those of you who've visited or been in these times in Miami, then you know it can switch on and off. The weather can be horrible without any forewarning. So there are a couple of caveats. What the city did, though, do in Miami is they were closing certain streets in Miami to allow businesses to extend their patio outdoor seating right on the streets as well, which was very generous and very nice. But that's where we are right now at the moment. And parts of Florida have, I mean, you go further up north, there's no, as if nothing ever happened. The beaches are packed. restaurants are packed, bars are packed. So from an operations, from a business standpoint, we do everything we can to protect our employees and also to give the customers the comfort. But there's a couple of caveats that we have to have in mind, especially in our other cities like Dallas, Washington D.C., Las Vegas. We test our staff, right? We provide them with all they need. We track them, the temperature and all. But there's only so much we can do within our four walls. But transport for employees and I think thinking of you, Pete, and our colleagues in the UK, when they go on the tubes and have an hour plus travel time, it's difficult. It's difficult for them to have that comfort level. So it's certainly something to take into account for us.
Yeah. Nancy, can I go back to you as a question? And I'll ask all of you actually, in terms of what's been hit most. Someone asked what day parts have been hit most. You sort of sense it might be breakfast. What's been the worst area?
Lunch for sure, because lunch has always been the most heavily trafficked, most heavily used day part. And as businesses, especially in the metropolitan areas, closed down, that had a dramatic and measurable impact. Secondarily, breakfast, for very much the same reason. Now, it is true that the QSR, the quick serves, were able to keep themselves up and running, but again, volumes down substantially in the absence of the habitual business users, if you will.
Yeah. So it is location, because I think we're sensing that. We're sort of worried, even in the UK, that people are staying local, which is great, but they're not going back into city centres. I mean, David, for you, in terms of your opening, have you got a strategy about what bars are going to open, which aren't going to open, what your ranging is going to be like?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, Peter, I think that about 6-8 weeks ago, we realized that if we were waiting for someone to give us a manual on how to reopen the estate, then we'd probably be waiting for quite a long time. And that's rung true here in the UK, as we're the case study of how not to support the sector. But for us, there are some restricted opening times. There's some elements in London where we're looking closely even today at which parts of the weekend day we will initially open and how many members of team we can bring back. But our current plan is and remains to open all of the locations at the earliest opportunity to open them. And we've been able to do that for a couple of reasons. And I think one of them is that we launched a thing called Brewdog Now 6 weeks ago now. So we have 30 UK locations up and running on Brewdog Now at the moment, which effectively gives you live online access or app access to each bar's tap list. And you can live see what's changing on the taps and get any draft beer delivered to your front door within 45 minutes. So we will open them all. They certainly won't look the same as they did the day that we locked down.
But you're keeping the brand alive. I mean, in a sense, with you, Jason, how did you keep contact with your customers, and are there things you're going to continue to do differently than perhaps you did before?
We really utilized the time over the last 3 months to find more organic ways to connect with our guests. We were fortunate to be involved in a few different charity initiatives. Edward Lee has the Lee Initiative, which provided meals in 20 different cities. It's our partner in 2 restaurants, so we were the DC location for that, and for 9 weeks we served about 200 meals a day to unemployed hospitality workers in our community, one hot meal every night, as well as groceries and supplies for them. So that was a wonderful thing. We partnered with Jose Andres and World Central Kitchen and Off Their Plate to do those things. So we found some good ways to participate and stay top of mind while doing something good for the community. It's amazing how good it feels to do something nice for people when you're having a rough go at it, if you will. And then for our other restaurants in the Wharf, we turned one of them into a grocery store. We brought in about 100 staple items that people that are holed up in their apartment needed. They couldn't get delivery from Fresh Direct or Amazon Prime because time slots for delivery were quickly taken. So we provided free delivery in the wharf for the 2,000 residents there, and brought them toilet paper and gloves and ribeye steaks and mac and cheese. And it's some of the orders were pretty funny when you'd see toilet paper and a key lime pie as their order with a margarita. So, it's amazing what people need when they're holed up in their home. But I really believe that that's going to pay off for us. Not only do we do something good, but we stay top of mind and really wanted to be part of the community. And we've seen a lot of people come back who are now rewarding us with their business when they're choosing to go out.
Yeah, I think that's paying off, and I know Davey's been doing that. One of the areas you're in airports, and I think been travelling as well. You've got spring chicken. I think you were saying to me when we talked last week that somewhere like Vegas, people don't want to fly. They're nervous about travel hubs, but they will let everything go when they walk through a casino door. I mean, how you see?
Right, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, sorry, it's pretty interesting, the data that we get. One of the good things is with Las Vegas and casinos reopening, the data that we collect is super helpful, and everything pre-reopening is, always changes, dramatically once you actually can study customer behavior and consumer behavior. So people from California to Arizona, they rather drive 4, 5, 6 hours in their own car, be it their own on their own schedule, instead of going into an airport. They're not comfortable in an airport. Certain airlines require to wear your mask on the plane. There's no, taking those middle seats out is a myth for the most part. So the planes are packed because airlines have to make up for their losses, and they really consolidate the flights. So, and the same goes for Miami. Miami, you can access from New York, you can access from up north, from Georgia. So really, people do road trips, and pair that with the reopening of the hotels and casinos at a reduced rate. That there is, is an extended weekend crowd there. But to your earlier point on how do you reopen and you really don't know until you know. It's the honest answer. What we experienced, and we closed literally overnight 10 restaurants in 5 states, plus our location in Singapore, and then we spend our time, reworking the plans and looking what other restaurants have done, and we broke it really down in 4 parts. One is reinforce the brand trust. How do we make sure that the company's purpose and principles are communicated out there? The second was maintain relevance. We wanted to make sure how do we stay relevant in a new social distancing experience, and that was for us really, really important, and switch a lot of it digitally. I think digital is the way to go during this pandemic, and really start being creative and see what others do and how we can build on that. The third one was revamp the consumer experience, introduce new to-go options. Don't look at to-go as just to-go food. It's a new experience. Whether it is the toilet paper roll that you throw in there, or a little thank you card to customers and saying, we appreciate you, anything like that. And of course, be part of the solution going forward. We need to lead. We need to make sure that we always, we don't step ahead, we are behind, we are a step ahead, and we're part of the solution going forward. During the time where we were dark, we engaged with hospitals, we engaged with schools. As you know, in the United States, a lot of our employees, they do live paycheck to paycheck, which may be a novel experience in Europe, but it is the case. I might be wrong, Peter, but and what we do is, we keep not only our customers engaged, but also employees engaged by providing food, by providing them, we haven't forgotten about you, and keep them informed and engaged. So these are the 4 buckets that we broke it into, because we knew hopefully it's a question of when, not a question of if we are going to be able to reopen. So we opened 4 of our businesses, and hopefully in the next 3 months we are able to reopen the rest of them.
We're coming to the end now. David, can I have to ask you a last question? I'm going to finish up with Nancy, but in terms of your opening schedules as well, because you're global, are there things which are going to change about where you go? Because you've been pretty aggressive over the last few years. The world is, anywhere in the world could find a brew dog.
Yeah, there's no dramatic or systemic change to that strategy, Peter. And we had 30 new locations in the 2020 pipeline, and despite actually we opened a new brew pub in Rotterdam 2 weeks ago, so we had one new opening during the course of this. But that opening schedule has been kicked down the road a little bit. But no dramatic change to our approach to which markets are important to us. I think definitely a much clearer understanding, and even more clear understanding of how important it is for the purpose and the ethos and the culture of the brand to shine through in absolutely every single opening that we do, and every single transaction with customers, even more so than ever. And to Jason's point earlier about some of the bits of doing good during this that will stand his business in good stead moving forward. Now, our premise has been, don't do marketing, do good. And I think that will stand us in very good stead as we open in new markets.
And even when we've seen marketing today, it's all been collaborative, which has been great. Nancy, can I finish with you? In terms of, looking at the States as a whole and wider afield as well, how optimistic are you? And are there any changes you think are going to stick?
Well, I'm optimistic based on the material that we took a look at earlier. I mean, there's just this extraordinary wellspring of creativity, just what you've heard from the panelists today in terms of how they're responding to market conditions. I think the warning flags, the objective is to get the customer to pivot back to us, to get them away from their working from home, pantry fatigue mode, back into an eat at restaurant mode. We play an important social and cultural role. They're anxious, there's pent-up demand. The ultimate question will be questions regarding safety, and in this country in particular, questions regarding a potential second wave. We're not through the first wave of COVID here, so I think we need to be in a wait and see mode. But ultimately, I'm very optimistic because I believe in the creativity and relevance of the business.
Yeah, well, thank you all very much. And I think on that note, absolutely right. We've seen some great ideas and some great drive, great creativity. Thank you all, Nancy, David, Jason, Yavuz. Hope to see you again soon, virtually, obviously, but come and visit your places as well, because I like Atlanta, Glasgow, BC, and Miami, all of them. Thanks very much. And
all the best to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. We've covered a lot of ground, and I wanted to get a sense of what's happening elsewhere, because, as I said, with today's news for the majority of you from UK, we are really in that last countdown. It's a lot shorter time than we'd hoped for, thanks to our dear Prime Minister, but there we are. Trying to sum up, there's a lot of areas. I think it is a matter of how we treat our people. They are going to be different. Listen to consumers, but also trust in your own creativity. And I think one of the things that comes through is that need to be flexible, but also one of the lessons, I think, is to work together. And some of that collaborative projects we've seen today have been absolutely fundamental. So it leaves me to thank you, our audience, for being with us today, to thank all our speakers for their time, particularly to Sarah for getting up so early out of LA, and all of the rest of you in UK for staying up a bit later. At least there's not a pub to go to, but you can have a drink at home. Also, thanks to CGA for working with me on this, and to Harrison, Harry, and Herman Stewart, who are our partners in Atlantic Club, and also word to CPL, which is CGA's training arm, who have helped put all this technology together for us today. You can see me again if you really want to with CGA next week on July the 1st, when CGA will be announcing the results of their latest business leaders survey to see how ready the industry is for that July the 4th start. And that's it, guys. Thank you very much. See you virtually all again soon. Goodbye.